Another deadline is breathing down our backs. We're less than 5 hours away from the April 15th tax deadline. And if you pay taxes, President Obama wants most of you to fork over more money. Well, yes, since Inauguration Day, President Obama pushing for 442 different tax increases. But a Republican-led Congress getting in the way and blocking all of them, or at least most of them. 20 Obamacare-related tax increases obviously did go through. But it's important to note, On the Record has been trying to get information about tax increase proposals from past presidents so that we could have a better frame of reference. But getting those numbers seems almost impossible. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann joins us. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Greta. Thanks for having me on today when a lot of people have their pencils sharpened and they're working furiously to get their tax returns in before the midnight deadline tomorrow.
And indeed, you know, a Gallup poll says 52% of Americans say what they have to pay is too much. That's up 46% from 46% in 2012. 42% say it's about right. 3% say too low. But 52% of Americans say their taxes are too high.
Well, I would agree with them. I'm a former federal tax litigation attorney. That's what I did for a living. And we have some history. You talked about history. If you look at John F. Kennedy, a Democrat president, he cut taxes in 1962 and 64. We had 8 years of economic growth and expansion, about 5% a year, pretty good, until 68 and 69, when we increased taxes again. That hurt the economy. But the real kicker was when President Nixon took the dollar off of the gold standard. We had loose money plus high taxes. That created a disaster throughout the 1960s because we had increased government spending and increased government regulation. But the real renaissance happened in 1981 when we had tax cuts. Ronald Reagan, the Federal Reserve, actually kept the dollar pretty stable. And when we did that, we saw an unprecedented growth, not only under Reagan, but also under George Bush I and also under Bill Clinton. We had 18 years of growth until 2000, until present. And the last 15 years haven't been pretty.
All right, I'm just curious. I mean, my history might be a little bit weak, but when JFK reduced the personal income tax, wasn't it enormously high under the Eisenhower administration, and we reduced it down to well above what we even have now, right? Am I wrong on that?
Well, it helped when JFK brought it down, but it was dramatically brought down under Ronald Reagan, under Kemp Roth.
Where was it under Eisenhower? Do you remember?
You know, there were some rates that were just outrageously high, but the difference was we had a lot of loopholes. And so people use shelters and loopholes. Anytime you have extraordinary high tax rates, we've had tax rates as high as 90% in this country, Greta. But when that's happened, there have been shelters and loopholes, so people just shift their money around. The brilliance of the Kemp-Roth bill in '81 is that taxes came down dramatically for everyone, not just the rich. For everyone, taxes came down. 18 years of solid growth, Greta. We had only a very brief 18-month recession. When Bill Clinton cut the capital gain tax rate, we had extreme growth. That was a very positive. So it shows whether it's Democrat or Republican, if we can cut taxes, if we can have a solid dollar, if we can check government spending and check government regulation, that's your formula for success. Unfortunately, Barack Obama is doing just the opposite. He's wanting to increase taxes. He has a loose money policy. He's growing government spending, and he's growing government regulation. That's why we have problems today.
I only have 30 seconds left. I'm curious. I know you want to change the tax code. I know what is that ever, and I know many people do. Is that ever going to happen in our lifetime?
Oh, of course it will. All we need is we need a conservative Senate, which I hope the American people will give us in November. And in 2016, we need a pro-growth president, and we'll get there.
All right. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Greta.
Okay, in 4.5 hours, it is April 15th, the tax deadline. Of course, you have until midnight on the 15th. But something many people fear even more than the taxes is getting audited. So how likely are you to get audited? The Wall Street Journal's Jason Bellini is uncovering some startling numbers. He joins us. Nice to see you, Jason.
Thanks, Greta.
Okay, so who's at risk of being audited and why?
Well, the most wealthy, people making over $1 million, they're most at risk. You have about a 1 in 10 chance of being audited if you make over $1 million, and that's up from about 6.5% just 5 years ago. Now, people at the lower end of the spectrum, if you're making under $200,000, you've only basically got a less than 1% chance, lower than it was 5 years ago.
And in terms of the manpower, is the IRS growing so there are more people to do audits, or are they cutting back on that? What's the IRS ability to audit people?
Well, I mean, the reason they're going after the higher dollar people is because they have fewer people available to do this work. Their budget is down. Now, President Obama has proposed to increase the budget by 10% for IRS enforcement, and they say in their budget proposal that for every dollar that they spend on enforcement, they'll bring in an additional $6 in revenue.
In terms of the IRS, is there a sense that, people I hear get audited, they're terrifying experiences. Do you ever hear that someone says, well, okay, it was an audit, I didn't like doing it, but at least I thought it was orderly and I understand it?
Well, there are a lot of different types of audits, but there are a few that are just awful. One, the audit from hell is the research audit, and that's actually done at random, where they're trying to find unreported income. Where you really have to worry, we're told, is if 2 agents show up. That's when they're really going to dig deep, and that's where you really need to have a lawyer there to help you.
I suppose if you have a W-2 form, if that's your form of employment, that it's probably less likely that you're going to get audited than if you happen to do business with a lot of cash. Is that fair? Is that true?
That's exactly right. Well, the way it works these days is they're using computer algorithms to try to find people who are outliers, people who have more deductions than the norm, more than the median. And they're also looking very closely now at, those people who have other red flags. If you've got rounded numbers in your taxes, that's a red flag in this computer algorithm. Anything that makes you stand out from the crowd puts you at greater risk of an audit.
Anytime you ever hear about people getting audited and at the end they get more money back, or is it you always have to pay?
Well, I haven't personally heard of that. I think that in most cases they find things that there are, and they want receipts for everything, especially for your charitable deductions. If it's anything over a few $100s, you need to have a letter to back that up.
Well, anyway, so April 15th, it's almost here, and then you got 24 hours. Everyone's got to deal with the IRS. Anyway, or file an extension. Jason, thank you.
Thanks, Retta.
Okay, let's go off the record for a minute. And as noted, tomorrow is an important day. It's the day you keep your commitment to the government and you pay your taxes. But as you slip that return into the mailbox, you have every right to be enraged. Our tax code is a mess. It is unintelligible. Even members of Congress and the president who passed the tax code and signed into law, they have no clue how to figure it out. They hire someone. That's why no one does any of his own taxes. They hire someone. Imagine that's incredible, isn't it? But that's not all. The tax code is grossly unfair, loaded with pork, special deals for special people. You need to have a big, fat wallet to lobby government to get yourself a special deal. Politicians do love that campaign money. Chances are you don't have that. And what happens if you don't keep your word and you don't pay your taxes, or even if you make an innocent mistake? Your paycheck could get seized, your house could get a lien, maybe even you'll end up in jail. Well, there's a different story for politicians. They don't keep their promises. They are not fixing the tax code as they promised. So what do? We re-elect them. Maybe we're the ones who are messed up. So happy tax day. That's my off-the-record comment tonight.